clearly that she's distraught, something's wrong. She tries to talk to her. Little Susie has nothing to do with mom. She says, I'm going to my room. And she runs upstairs, slams the door, and is absolutely uncontrollably sobbing in her room. Hours go by. And mom's listening to this, and she tries over and over and over again to go upstairs and talk to little Susie and find out what's going wrong. And Susie doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't want to unlock the door. Finally, that evening, Dad comes home. Hears the report from Mom about what's been going on. And goes up to the room, taps on the door, says, Susie, it's Daddy, can I come in? Susie finally opens the door, lets him come in. And as he enters the room, he notices a crumpled up piece of construction paper sitting on the bed. And as soon as she sees Dad looking at this paper, Susie runs over, jumps on top of the bed, covers up the paper, and starts sobbing again. It takes probably 10, 15 minutes before Dad can finally get her to calm down just enough to ask her what on earth is going on. And finally, through the sobs, Susie's about cried out, and she says, I made a picture in art class today. And Dad says, well, can I see it? Susie doesn't want to share it, but eventually, reluctantly, she pulls the crumpled up piece of paper away and hands it to her father, who opens it up and, as any father would, exclaims, Susie, this is gorgeous. And he starts to look at the picture and he says, I remember this house that you drew here. This is the summer beach house that we stayed in. She says, yeah, Daddy, that's right. I drew our beach house. And as she continues to look at the picture, Daddy says, the sun was really hot that day. I love the way you drew it there with the smiley face and everything. That was really hot. She says, yeah, I remember. That's exactly what I remember. It was really, really hot. So I drew the sun really, really big. Daddy looks back at the picture again and says, and I remember this tree swing with the tire swing on the tree. That was fun. We had a lot of fun with that. She said, yeah, I had one of the best memories of that trip was swinging on that swing, so I drew it right there in front of the house. And little by little, as Daddy's appreciating the picture, Susie starts to relax, starts to calm down. The sobbing begins to subside. And on and on and on he goes, propping her up, telling her what a wonderful job she's done with this painting. And the clouds are oh so perfect, and they're just off in the distance, just like it was at the beach, and the water and everything. And every time he mentions something else, Susie starts to relax. And just as he's about done, he finally looks up and he says, in the top right corner, and he points and he says, but you know what? I think this is my favorite part of the whole picture right here. These seagulls are absolutely gorgeous. Just like that, Susie's in tears. Absolutely inconsolable, beyond belief. Past anything that she was earlier, she is out of control. And when he can finally calm her down to talk about it, Susie says, Daddy, I didn't paint those seagulls. She says, my teacher put those in there. She says, I was drawing the picture and my teacher came up to me and she said, Susie, this is a wonderful, wonderful painting you've done. Tell me about it. And she went on to tell her about how the sun was so bright. She made the sun nice and big because it was just so warm and so comforting on those days. And she drew the picture of the house and the family enjoying the time in front of the house and the tire swing and the water and the clouds off in the distance and everything else. And her teacher said, that's an absolutely fantastic story. That's a great, great picture you painted. But you know what would make it perfect? If we just balanced it out a little bit. There's nothing up here in this corner. So what if we just put a couple of seagulls up here and painted a few seagulls in? The moral of the story, Susie didn't see the seagulls. That wasn't her story. It wasn't her picture. And it was ruined completely by somebody with far more talent than she had coming in and changing the story. And she was abjectly miserable for hours on end because of the fact that this teacher had stolen her story from her, had changed the story. There were no seagulls on that day in Susie's memory. And when Dad Ann said, my favorite part of the whole thing is those doggone seagulls over the top. Right? I tell that story because we have to remember that when we are telling our stories, they are our stories. And if you allow somebody else to have control over your stories, you allow somebody else to have control over everything that you're doing. Right? Finish this phrase. Perception is reality, folks. If you allow somebody else to tell your story, you are allowing somebody else to have control over perception and therefore reality.